So you want to talk about money with your honey, but you're not sure the actual steps to take to talk about money without fighting. Today, I've got 9 tips that are divided into 3 steps to take before you have the money talk, during the money talk, and after the money talk. Because I've watched those other YouTube videos that talk about, hey, you should be on the same page and you should have an open mind. But yeah, how do you actually do that and talk about money without fighting? And that's what I'm talking about today. Welcome to Adulting with Money. I'm Dan Hines, and I'm going to help you and other couples get on the same page with money. Don't forget to subscribe so you can get all the future videos. So tip number 1 for talking about money with your honey is for you individually to think about what it is that you want with your money and this money conversation before you even begin. Because if you start with the what and then move on to the why, and you get clear exactly on what is it that I want out of this conversation. Are we going to talk about stuff? Do we need to make a decision? Is this something I just need to get off my chest? If you are wanting this money meeting, decide what it is that you want out of it before you even get started. And then once you start to think about, okay, well, I know what I want, but then why do I want it? It'll be much more clear, and it'll help your partner figure out, okay, this is what this conversation is about. Because a lot of times couples will say, hey, we need to talk about money or we need to talk about budgeting. And then you start the conversation and you just kind of look at each other and nothing really happens. Or you start to talk in circles. So if you want to talk about money with your honey, be sure to sit down and think, okay, this is what I want out of this conversation. Let's talk about it. So that's step number 1. Tip number 2 is to set aside time to have this money talk, because you don't want to ambush your partner. You don't want to corner them. You don't want to surprise them when you're talking about money. Say to them, hey, I need to talk about money. And step 1 was figuring out what you want in the conversation. And you can say, hey, I'd like to talk about this. When do you have 20 minutes free? And maybe it's going to be tonight, maybe it's going to be tomorrow, maybe it's going to be on the weekend, or maybe it's right then where they actually have time to put down their phone, stop what they're doing, and to sit and have a real conversation. Because sometimes we want to corner our partners into talking about money, and that's a terrible idea because they're just going to get defensive and then nothing's going to happen. And then tip number 3, and this is my favorite tip, comes from a book called Radical Candor. And this book is really for managers and businesses to have better meetings and to be better managers. But the one tip that I love from it, and I suggest to all sorts of other people, is to take meetings and divide them into 2 sections, or decide, is this going to be a brainstorming meeting or is this going to be a decision meeting? Because they talk about it in Radical Candor that when you have conflicts in meetings, it's because people are coming into it, say, hey, we're going to talk about stuff, we're going to see what's going on. And then there's other people that want to get in, make a decision, and leave and move on with their day and get on with their work. And when you have 2 sets of people assuming that the purpose of the meeting is different, then that's where you start to have a lot of conflict. So when you're thinking about having this money talk and what you want to talk about and why you want to talk about it, and you set aside time to talk about it, you want to then decide, okay, is this going to be a brainstorming meeting? Are we just going to talk about stuff and get each other's opinions and thoughts? Or is this going to be a decision meeting? And we've already talked about this stuff. Let's decide. And if you decide that before the meeting starts, which way it's going to go, then you're going to have a much more productive money talk, and it's not going to turn into a money fight. So a perfect example is when my wife, when she comes to me and says, hey, I want to buy a couch. I'm going to go, great. She's much better at picking out furniture and she has better style than I do. So I'm more than happy to let her pick out when it's time to buy new things. But I'm not going to give her a blank check and say, okay, buy what you want. We start to talk about, well, when you say a new couch, do you mean, do we want to have recliners? What color? How big? Do we want to replace the love seat at the same time? And so we have a brainstorming session and just talk about what she's thinking, what I'm thinking, and what it is that we want as a couple. And then we go shopping. We go to stores and we look online and we get a much better idea of what it is that we want, and then we have the second meeting. We have the decision meeting to say, okay, here's what we like, here's how much it costs, how are we going to afford this? All right, so those are the 3 steps to take before having a money talk. The 3 steps to have during a money talk is, number 1 is to set a time limit. we don't want to talk about money forever. And there's this thing called Parkinson's law where if you give a certain amount of time for a task, you're going to take that entire amount of time for that task. So if you set aside 2 hours to talk about money, you're going to talk about money for 2 hours. If you set aside 20 minutes to talk about money, you'll talk about money for 20 minutes. And you'll probably get a decision faster if you set a shorter time limit. So when you're thinking about what this conversation is, why you want to have it, when you're going to have it, and what you're going to talk about, think about, could we talk about this and get it done in 30 minutes? You probably don't need an hour for really any money topic, unless it's a huge topic where you really, really want to have a long, drawn-out discussion, which could be a good thing. So tip number 2 for during the money meeting is to start with the what and the why, which was one of your tips for before the meeting, but that first tip was just for you to decide what is it that I want out of this meeting, why do I want it? And then when you start to talk about money with your honey is to talk about, okay, what do we want and why do we want it? Because I've learned from Tony Robbins this thing called the tyranny of the how, is when we're talking with other people, we love to throw up ideas like, how about we do this? And then someone goes, and blows that idea out of the air. And then someone else goes, how about we do this? And someone goes, and blows that idea out of the air. And so we have a lot of these hows that are getting thrown into the air and no progress is made. And you've probably experienced this with your partner as well, as you've talked about, well, how about we do this? Or how about we do that? And then nothing seems to work. So if you start with what you want, we want to buy a house. We want to buy a new couch. We want to start budgeting. And then you talk about the why, the purpose. Like, why are you wanting this thing? And once you agree on that, once you get on the same page with that what and the why, then you can start to talk about the how. So going back to the example with my wife and I and the couch, we decided we wanted a couch. We knew why we wanted a couch, a new couch, because all the old stuff was getting stained and we didn't really take care of it. We wanted something new and we wanted recliners. We didn't have those yet. So we knew the what and the why. And then we went and figured out the how after we got on the same page with the what and the why. Okay, final tip. So during the money meeting is you want to decide who's got the ball. So when you look at football teams, one thing that works well with them is that they practice a lot. They know who's snapping the ball, who's getting the ball, it's usually the quarterback, where the ball's going to go to next. So when they call a play, everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. So at the end of your money meeting, decide, okay, here are the things that need to happen. Who's going to do what next? Just so both of you are on the same page with the ball's getting passed to this person, to you, or your partner. All right, so now it's after the money meeting. So now what do you do? Is to say, well, you have a list of tasks, and who's going to do those tasks? Those people, whether it's you or your partner, need to complete those tasks. So that's tip number 1, is to actually go and do the work that you promised your partner you would do. And your partner needs to do the work they promised that they would do. But also, tip number 2 then is, if you get busy, is to pass the ball to your partner. To say, hey, I know I was supposed to research these couches, but work got really busy, or, the kids took too much time. Can you do that this weekend, or can you do that tonight? Pass the ball to them so the ball never gets dropped. And you can do that for each other. And, when to pass the ball really depends on how life is going for the both of you. You know your tasks, you know who's doing what, and just pass the ball when you need to. All right, final tip to bring everything full circle is to schedule that next money meeting. So if you decided to split your money talk into a brainstorming and then into a decision meeting, then you need to schedule that decision meeting. When are we going to talk about this? When's our homework going to be due, and when are we going to sit down again? And so now you have 3 tips for before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the money meeting, so that you can actually have a money discussion and make decisions rather than having money fights. Thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's video.